Stop justifying your life to the wrong people. You know the ones. They question your choices. They minimize your progress. They twist your words until you're left defending decisions that don't even concern them. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your reasons, your plans, or your explanations. Some people just want control, not clarity. And the more you explain yourself to the wrong people, the less energy you have to actually live your life. When you find yourself explaining and explaining over and over again, you've got to stop and ask what is really happening here. The wrong people don't actually want understanding, they want power. That's the part that so many of us miss. You think you're clearing things up. You think if you can just explain one more time or give them the bigger picture, then maybe they'll finally see where you're coming from. But that's not their goal. Their goal isn't to see you clearly. Their goal is to keep you under their thumb. That's why no matter how much sense you make, they twist it, they poke holes in it, they throw it back in your face. Because the point was never about truth, it was about control. And once you see it that way, you start realizing how much of your energy is being drained trying to win a game that's rigged against you. The wrong people know exactly how to keep you explaining yourself. They ask questions they already know the answer to. They push back not because they disagree, but because they want to keep you second guessing. Every time you justify, you're handing them more control. You're putting them in the position of judge, letting them decide if your life, your choices, your progress measure up. And the more you do that, the more you shrink yourself down, waiting for their stamp of approval. That stamp is never coming because it was never about giving it to you. It was about keeping you dependent on their reaction. When you get caught in that cycle, you stop trusting yourself. You stop making decisions from a place of confidence, and instead you start filtering every move through the thought of how you're going to explain it. That is how power shifts. It's subtle, but it's strong. You don't even notice how quickly you go from living your life to living on defense. That's why it feels exhausting. That's why you replay conversations in your head, wishing you had said something differently, because deep down, you know you're giving away ground that doesn't belong to them. It's not that explaining is wrong. With the right people, it's healthy, it builds connection, it creates understanding. But with the wrong people, explaining becomes a weapon used against you. They don't collect your explanations to understand, they collect them to control. They'll remember every detail, not because they care, but because they can use it later. They'll twist your words, remind you of what you said last month, and corner you with your own honesty. That's not clarity, that's manipulation. And here's the truth, the wrong people feed on that. They thrive on your need to be understood because it gives them the upper hand. If you're waiting for their acceptance, they're always in control. That's why no matter how carefully you explain yourself, it never feels like enough. It wasn't supposed to be enough. They don't need your explanation. They need your dependence. And the moment you stop justifying, they lose that leverage. They lose the little strings they've been pulling to keep you in their orbit. So the key isn't to come up with better reasons or sharper arguments. The key is to recognize who you're dealing with. If they don't want to understand you, no amount of words will change that. You don't argue someone into respect. You don't explain your way into being valued. Respect and value are either there or they're not. And if they're not, the best explanation in the world won't put them there. That's why it's so important to step back and see the dynamic for what it is. Are you explaining to someone who actually cares, or are you explaining to someone who just wants to keep you explaining so they can keep the upper hand? Every explanation you give is energy leaving you. And that energy could have been used to build something, to grow, to move forward. Think about how much time you've spent in conversations where you're repeating yourself, defending why you made a choice, trying to convince someone to see your perspective. It feels endless, doesn't it? You walk away drained, frustrated, sometimes even doubting yourself. That's not just a bad conversation, that's energy theft. Every ounce of effort you pour into explaining yourself to the wrong person is effort that's no longer available for your progress. It's like carrying water in a bucket full of holes. No matter how much you pour in, it keeps leaking out. When you constantly explain yourself, you're not just giving away words, you're giving away your focus. That focus should be on your future, your goals, your peace of mind, but instead it gets redirected into arguments that go nowhere. That's the hidden cost of justification. You can't measure it in the moment, but over time it adds up. The energy you lose defending yourself is the same energy you could have used to take the next step in your career, to start the project you've been delaying, to strengthen the relationships that actually matter. But when the wrong people keep pulling you into their web of questioning and doubting, you end up burning fuel that was meant for your own growth. And the thing is, those explanations never stop. Once you start down that road, it becomes a cycle. Today, it's justifying why you made one choice. Tomorrow, it's defending why you didn't do it their way. And the next day, it's clarifying why you said what you said. Before you know it, explaining has become a habit, and habits consume your identity. You start believing that your decisions only have value if they can be explained well enough to satisfy someone else. That belief chips away at your confidence until you start hesitating on even simple choices because you're already bracing for the interrogation. That hesitation is wasted energy too. Think about how differently your life feels when your energy is in the right place. When you invest it in yourself, there's momentum. Every small step compounds. You make a decision, you follow through, you feel stronger, and that strength builds more progress. That's what forward movement looks like. But the wrong people interrupt that momentum by pulling you back into defense mode. Instead of stacking progress, you're stuck recycling explanations. It's like running on a treadmill, sweating, tired, moving your legs, but staying in the exact same spot. That's what over-explaining to the wrong people does. The truth is, some people thrive on keeping you stuck. If you're busy explaining yourself, you're not busy excelling. They might not even do it consciously, but their pattern is clear. They ask, they prod, they doubt, and then they watch you spend your energy trying to make them satisfied. And the dangerous part is, they're never satisfied. No matter how clear you are, no matter how logical you sound, it's never enough. That's how you know the problem isn't your clarity. The problem is where you're placing your energy. So, what happens when you stop justifying? You reclaim that energy. You stop leaking it into arguments that don't serve you, and you start pouring it into action that does. You move from defending yourself to directing yourself. And that shift alone changes everything. Because now, instead of exhausting yourself trying to explain why you're actually moving. And the people who truly care, the ones who belong in your corner, they don't need a full explanation anyway. They see your effort, they trust your character, and they respect your choices without demanding a speech every time you make one. That's where your energy belongs, with those who value it, not with those who drain it. People who truly value you don't demand constant reasons. They respect your boundaries without needing a detailed breakdown of every choice you make. Think about the people in your life who really care for you, the ones who trust your judgment. They don't stop you every step of the way asking for proof. They don't question your motives like a detective, and they don't make you feel like you're on trial for simply living your life. Instead, they respect that you have your own mind, your own path, and your own way of handling things. That's what real respect looks like. It's not in agreement on everything. It's in the space they give you to be yourself without interrogation. When someone values you, they know your decisions don't need their stamp of approval to be valid. They recognize that your life belongs to you, and that boundary is clear. Contrast that with the wrong people. They want constant explanations, constant justifications, and constant updates because it makes them feel in control. They don't see your boundaries as something to honor. They see them as obstacles to push against. That's why conversations with them always leave you feeling like you've crossed a line, even though it was your line to begin with. They don't respect the space you've drawn because they don't respect you. And here's the important part. If someone doesn't respect your boundaries, they don't really value you. They value what they can get from you. They value the control, the access, the influence they have over your decisions. But you as a person, your freedom, your independence, your dignity, those things are not what they're after. The people who genuinely value you, they don't just tolerate your boundaries, they actually appreciate them. They understand that boundaries are what keep relationships healthy. They know that if you say no, it's not rejection, it's clarity. They know that if you keep something private, it's not distance, it's self-respect. And because they value you, they don't take those things personally. They give you space to breathe, and they trust that when you want to share, you will. That kind of respect feels light. It feels freeing. You don't leave those conversations exhausted because you didn't have to defend your every move. Boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. They let people know where you stand and what you stand for. And the people who are meant to be in your life, they see that and they honor it. They don't push you into constant explanation because they don't need it. They already trust your character. They already trust that if you're making a decision, you've thought it through in the way that's best for you. That doesn't mean they'll never ask questions, but when they do, it's to understand you, not to control you. There's a big difference between someone asking to connect and someone asking to control, and you can always tell which one it is by how they respond to your boundaries. When someone values you, they can handle your no without falling apart. They can accept your decision without demanding a 10-minute explanation. They don't guilt trip you for setting limits, and they don't make you feel selfish for honoring yourself. That's the test right there. If you set a boundary and the other person respects it, that's value. If you set a boundary and they fight it, that's control. And when you start paying attention to who respects your boundaries, you start seeing clearly who really values you and who only values what you give them. So the freedom comes when you stop trying to convince the wrong people and start recognizing the right ones. The wrong people will always want reasons, but the right people just want you. They want you to be whole. They want you to be strong. They want you to be at peace. They don't need you to over-explain because they already know your worth isn't tied to their understanding. And once you see that difference, you stop wasting energy trying to prove yourself to the wrong people and start investing it in the relationships where you don't have to prove anything at all. Constantly defending yourself teaches people something dangerous. It teaches them that they are entitled to your choices. Every time you explain, every time you justify, every time you go out of your way to convince someone that your decision is acceptable, you send an unspoken message. You're telling them that your life is open for their approval, that your actions are up for debate, that your boundaries are negotiable if they push hard enough. And once that pattern is set, it becomes harder and harder to break. The more you defend, the more they expect it, and soon it feels like you can't make even the simplest decision without offering a defense. What started as an occasional explanation becomes a full-time role of justifying yourself to people who should never have had that authority in the first place. When you think about it, this isn't just about words. It's about training. People learn how to treat you based on what you allow. If you give them long explanations every time they challenge you, they learn that pressing you gets results. They learn that if they question you enough, you'll fold, or at least you'll hand them the power to sit in judgment. And people who crave control love that dynamic. They feed off it. Because now, instead of focusing on your own path, you're busy managing their reactions, and they're the ones in the driver's seat. That's how entitlement grows, not overnight, but through repeated training that you may not even realize you're giving them. It's easy to think defending yourself is harmless, that you're just clearing things up. But the truth is, the more you do it, the more you shift the balance of power. You move from being an individual who makes choices to being a defendant who has to argue a case. And the scary part is, once someone feels entitled to your choices, they won't stop at small things. It starts with them questioning why you said no to dinner plans, but it escalates into them challenging your career moves, your relationships, even the way you live day to day. They stop seeing you as a person with autonomy and start seeing you as someone whose life decisions must pass through their filter. That's the danger of constantly defending yourself. It conditions others to believe they are owed that explanation. But here's the reality. No one is owed access to your reasoning. Your choices are yours. The people who love and respect you don't demand a courtroom defense every time you make a move. They may be curious, they may ask, but they don't demand. And there's a big difference. When someone values you, they trust your judgment even if they don't fully understand it. When someone feels entitled, they refuse to accept your judgment until it aligns with what they want. That's the line, and it's a line worth protecting. The habit of defending yourself comes from a good place most of the time. You want to be understood. You want to avoid conflict. You want to show that you're not acting recklessly. But when you put that habit in the wrong hands, it backfires. Instead of peace, you get more conflict. Instead of understanding, you get more doubt. Instead of respect, you get more entitlement. That's why it feels like you're running in circles, because the very thing you're doing to earn respect is the thing eroding it. You start realizing that the cost isn't just your time, it's your freedom. Every defense you give is like handing out little pieces of permission slips, as if your life needs to be signed off by someone else before it's valid. Over time, that becomes exhausting. You lose the ability to act freely because in the back of your mind, you're already preparing the speech for when they ask why. That's not living, that's performing, and performances eventually burn you out. The shift comes when you decide that your choices don't need defending, not in the sense of being reckless, but in the sense of owning your life. The moment you stop automatically explaining yourself, you stop feeding that entitlement. You break the pattern you unintentionally created. And it's uncomfortable at first because people who've been trained to expect your defenses won't like losing that power. But discomfort is a small price compared to a lifetime of teaching others that they're entitled to your decisions. And once you hold that line, you begin to notice who respects it and who resists it, and that clarity is worth everything. Living unapologetically is about removing the invisible chains that keep you tied to the need for approval that was never going to come anyway. When you live your life always explaining, always defending, always trying to make everyone else comfortable with your decisions, what you're really doing is waiting for permission to exist as yourself. You tell yourself that if you explain it well enough, if you prove your intentions clearly enough, then the people around you will finally understand and finally give you the acceptance you've been chasing. But the truth is, some people were never going to accept you no matter what you said. They weren't rejecting your explanations, they were rejecting the fact that you dared to stand in your own truth without bowing to their control. That's why living unapologetically matters. It's choosing to stop playing a game you could never win. When you live unapologetically, you stop bending under the weight of expectations that don't belong to you. You stop editing yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. You stop waiting for the nod of approval that never comes, and you start walking forward because you know your worth isn't tied to anyone else's understanding. There is freedom in that. Freedom to make choices without rehearsing the speech you'll need to justify them. Freedom to stand in your boundaries without feeling guilty for holding them. Freedom to say yes when it feels right and no when it doesn't, without dragging yourself through endless explanations. That kind of freedom doesn't just change your relationships, it changes how you see yourself. The trap of seeking approval is that it feels endless. Even if someone does approve, it only lasts until the next decision you make. Then the cycle starts again. You feel that pressure in your chest, the voice in your head saying, what will they think? How will I explain this? Will this be good enough for them? And in those moments, you forget that your life is not an open courtroom for everyone's opinions. Living unapologetically closes that courtroom. It doesn't mean you become careless or cruel. It means you stop putting yourself on trial. It means you let your actions speak for themselves. And you trust yourself enough to know that not everyone's approval is necessary. The people who matter don't need you to shrink or over-explain. They value you for who you are, not for how well you can defend your choices. Living unapologetically helps you filter out the people who only stick around as long as you're performing for their approval. Because the moment you stop performing, they show their true colors. They push back, they criticize, they withdraw, and that's when you realize they were never really in your corner to begin with. That realization stings, but it also clears space for people who actually belong, people who can handle your strength, people who don't demand explanations but offer encouragement, people who respect your no and celebrate your yes without needing to control the reasons behind it. When you decide to stop apologizing for existing as yourself, your confidence grows. You start carrying yourself differently. You notice how much energy you save by not rehearsing defenses in your head. You You notice how much calmer you feel when you no longer replay conversations wondering if you explained yourself well enough. You notice how much progress you make when your energy isn't tied up in convincing people who don't want to be convinced. That's the hidden reward of living unapologetically. You get your energy back, you get your peace back, you get your focus back, and all of those things were yours all along. They were just buried under the weight of trying to please people who were never going to be pleased. Living unapologetically is not about ignoring others or dismissing every opinion. It's about choosing which voices actually matter and refusing to let the wrong ones dictate your life. It's about stepping into decisions with clarity instead of hesitation. It's about recognizing that approval is a moving target you'll never hit, and respect is something you command by how you carry yourself, not something you beg for through endless justifications. It's about waking up in the morning and realizing you don't owe anyone an explanation just for being who you are. And once that truth sinks in, you begin to experience a sense of strength and calm that no outside approval could ever give you.